Blog Talk Radio.
93. County 23, I'll give you a corrected address, but we do have a fire in a one-story ordinary. Looks like it's about 40 by 120, 125. We'll get to traffic control. Squad 5, Squad 5. We'll go to 273, 273. We'll go Battalion 18, 18th Battalion. With a 273, 273.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fire Engineering Talk Radio and another installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Glad to have you along tonight. I'm your host, Tom Merrill. Today's Tuesday, October 3rd, 2017, and I hope this evening finds things going well for you and in your department. And I know it's been a tough week for everybody, and sometimes I wonder where our country's headed, but we just have to band together and stay together as not just as Americans but as people and move on. And so let's maybe take a slight distraction tonight and talk about some of the great things going on in our volunteer fire service and also the challenges. And as you know, fall is in the air, and can't believe it's already October 3rd. And I'm glad to say that I'll be on the road still continuing to deliver the presentation that I'm so passionate about, and that's the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. I'm excited to go out and meet so many great volunteer firefighters, so many great firefighters, and talk about our great fire service and the challenges. But, my God, every time I go out on the road, and I'll be on the road again next week in the eastern part of our state, and it'll be a great reminder that there are so many great people out there. And our ranks are filled with fantastic people, and I'm reminded of that every time I go out and do my presentation. And hey, as a reminder, if you want to reach out to me to talk anything fire service related, or talk about my presentation, or if there's any way I can help you, or you just want to vent, as so many people do, I'm easy to get a hold of. Email tamerrill63@aol.com. I'm on Facebook. Please give my page a like, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. And I'm on Twitter. And so easy to get a hold of. And I'd love to talk to you and love to talk to you about anything that's on your mind when it comes to our great fire service. And, hey, as a reminder, tonight's show is sponsored by Honeywell DuPont and the Honeywell DuPont FDIC Scholarship Program. And I want to thank them very much for helping us out. And, again, if you didn't know that, Honeywell DuPont is providing an incredible opportunity for somebody you know, a deserving firefighter, to attend the premier firefighting event, that's FDIC, in 2018. It's all expenses paid. And if you want to nominate somebody, if you can think of a deserving firefighter, someone who's been an incredible contributor to the fire service in your area, in your firehouse, simply go on to the Honeywell DuPont FDIC Scholarship.com and you can nominate them. And it's all expenses paid, people. Airfare, hotel, registration. And it's the premier training event. Heck, they even give you a food stipend. So it's just a great opportunity to nominate somebody to go to this event if they can't make it any other way. And they'll be able to network with so many great firefighters and get so much great training and be able to take it back to their firehouse. And my gosh, it'll fire them up, no pun intended, for this great fire service of ours. And again, that's the Honeywell DuPont FDIC Scholarship.com for more details and information on how to do the nomination for some lucky firefighter you know to attend FDIC 2018, which runs from April 23rd to the 28th in Indianapolis. And these nominations are open. They've already awarded some. I believe they're doing one or two a month, but the nominations remain open, and you can nominate somebody up until December 1st, 2017. Yeah, I think they're doing it monthly, so you still have some time. So check it out. Recommend highly that you do it. If you're not fortunate enough to get to FDIC, or someone that can't, please check that out. And a couple other reminders. I want you to keep an eye out. The National Volunteer Fire Council is sending out a newsletter to all volunteer fire departments. So please keep an eye in your mailbox. It's going to be a new publication, and it's going to be designed to help personnel and departments take proactive steps in their firehouse to prevent injuries, to prevent illness, and also prevent maybe fatalities. There'll be a pull-out poster to help get the message out there about being safe. There'll be a a guide to physicals, and there's just going to be lots and lots of information. And they're going to be doing this newsletter and mailing it out to every fire company in North America, I believe. So keep your eye out for it. There's also a digital edition. Just go on nvfc.org, and you'll see a digital version of this newsletter. And it's important to remember that health and safety choices definitely impact our department, and not just yourself, but your department and the community you serve. And we need to take care of ourselves so the public and our crew can count on us to be ready and able to respond to help when called. The newsletter is titled It's Firefighter Strong, and again, it's designed to help our departments and our members, everybody from the department leader to the newest recruit, focus on some of the critical health and safety issues that face firefighters and EMS providers, and also provide steps that we can all take to make a safer, healthier department. So again, keep your eye out for it. Firefighter Strong will be in your mailbox, or if you want to access it now, nvfc.org, and you can get that right online digitally. And speaking of the National Volunteer Fire Council, there's also some neat stuff going on. Some researchers from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, in coordination and cooperation with the National Volunteer Fire Council, they're seeking volunteer firefighters to participate in a study on the health benefits that emergency responders can have, and their families too, if they use the Mediterranean diet. So they're looking for some people to volunteer, and these participants will have access to online tools and strategies for implementing healthier eating habits to minimize the risk of developing serious and chronic diseases. So I thought I'd pass that on to you because, again, we need to take care of ourselves, and a lot of times we're looking for ideas and things we can do to better take care of ourselves. So if you're interested in this, there's an introductory questionnaire to fill out, and there's some shorter questionnaires that'll be mailed to you. It's completely free. It's confidential. You can withdraw at any time. But if you do participate, you'll have access to a series of online tools which are specifically designed to help you as a firefighter and also your family improve your health. It's open for volunteer and call firefighters, EMTs, rescue personnel, anybody 18 and older, along with your spouse or significant other, are eligible to participate. If you'd like to, go on nvfc.org for more information, and I'll tell you what, I'll put it on my Facebook page as well. There'll be a link there. I don't want to read all the different lowercase and uppercase letters and slashes and dots that are in this link, but I'll get it on my site, if not tonight, definitely by tomorrow. And it's something you might want to check out because we do need to take care of ourselves. And, hey, while we're taking care of ourselves, let's do it with our family, too, both our inside the firehouse family and our blood-related family as well. And as I mentioned, it is fall. Fall is in the air. It's October. And what does that mean? It's fire prevention season. Next week, October 8th through the 14th, it's Fire Prevention Week. This year's theme, Every Second Counts, Plan 2 Ways Out. I say this every year. Hey, folks, this is a great way to connect with your community. It's a great way to demonstrate your professionalism. Great way to get engaged and connected and involved with your community. Show them what you do, and at the same time, listen to what they're telling you. What do they know about your department? What can you do better to maybe serve them? Get to know your neighbors, but no less of a chance to show your professionalism. So what are you doing? What are you doing for fire prevention? Hopefully you're having an open house, showing off your equipment, going to the schools, churches, daycares. I recommend you do something. And if you need some help, there is no shortage of online materials and fire prevention materials that you can get for Fire Prevention Week and all year, really, and really all year. Again, it's next week, October 8th through the 14th, and you can even use it as a recruitment opportunity to let the public know that your department needs more volunteers. Matter of fact, we continue to hear all the studies, all the research shows that a lot of communities don't even know they're protected by volunteer firefighters. Why not have people, as they come up to the firehouse, learn all about you as volunteer firefighters? Great information, again, is available through the National Volunteer Fire Council. NVFC.org, again, is their website. There's a lot of material on there that's free that you can access. Another great source of material, the National Fire Protection Association, their website, NFPA.org. Tons and tons of materials that you can get through them to advertise Fire Prevention Week. And this year's theme, Every Second Counts, Plan 2 Ways Out. Hey, if you'd like to call in tonight, again, I'd like to remind you the number. We'd love to hear from you, 760-454-8852. And I just want you to know that tonight marks the beginning of the 4th year for the Professional Volunteer Fire Department podcast. And as it was, our premiere episode was October 8th, 2014. So we are starting our 4th year, and I can't believe how time flies, but so grateful to Fire Engineering, to Chief Bobby Halton, and everybody at Fire Engineering for offering me this opportunity to maybe be an extension of your voice talking about the volunteer fire service. And I just want to pledge to you to continue working on your behalf with all of you, enhancing the image of us as volunteer firefighters, highlighting all our tremendous accomplishments, also talking about the pitfalls, but never losing sight of what we can all do to make our departments and our volunteer fire service as a whole just a little bit better, a little bit more professional. And I'm going to work so hard to continue bringing great guests onto this show who can help us out, who can mentor us, teach us, inspire us. Guests we can look to for guidance. We can lean on them for their experience and their expertise. And also guests, in some cases, who want to be known as simply volunteers whose only endeavor is to make a difference in their community and work as hard as they can in their volunteer firehouse. All great people, all making a difference in our great fire service. Great people for, like tonight's guest. I am so honored to introduce tonight's guest, Chief Billy Goldfeder. I don't think he needs much of an introduction. I like to say he's not only legendary, but he's extremely colorful, and I'm sure he needs no introduction, but if I could just for a minute say he's been a firefighter since 1973. He currently serves as the Deputy Fire Chief of the Loveland Sims Fire Department, which is in southwest Ohio. Been a chief officer since 1982, which was the year I entered the volunteer fire service, and I believe he served in a chief in a few other areas, I believe Virginia and Florida as well as Ohio, and he's been on so many committees. I think I have a paragraph full of committees that I don't need to report them all, and I'm sure we'll get into some of them tonight, and he hosts some great websites, Firefighter Close Calls, The Secret List, so many other great resources online that he is part of, and just so much to talk about. And just like our guest from last episode, Mike Lombardo, Chief Goldfeder also started out as one of us, as a volley in the Manhasset Lakeville Fire Department, which is in Long Island, I believe. And I am so honored and humbled to have him take the time to be on my show tonight. And if you would like to call in, again, 760-454-8852 is the number. Feel free to call in and talk about whatever is on your mind with Chief Goldfeder. Enough of me. Chief, are you with us?
I am. Thanks for having me, and congratulations
Absolutely.
on 4 years. That's good stuff.
Well, thank you. It does fly, and like I said, I just want to help get the message out there that there's so many great things being done in the volunteer fire service. And yes, we have challenges, and we can lean on each other and depend on each other to help out and share ideas. And matter of fact, that would be just an absolute great place to start with you, Chief. If you wouldn't mind, I know you started as a volunteer. If you would just give a nutshell synopsis here of your travels through the fire service and how you got to be the chief officer in Loveland Sims.
So I started as a kid chasing fire trucks in Long Island. I never knew a time where I wasn't interested. I actually was thrown out of public school in high school because my interest in the fire department was every time the horn went off, I'd want to leave class and you weren't allowed to. So my parents sent me away to a school in New Jersey where I promptly joined the local rescue squad and was allowed to leave during the day. So that was a positive for everybody involved. Fortunately, my father made enough donations to the school where I was actually able to graduate, and I then moved on I went to college down in Florida, in Broward County, where I lived in the one of the Broward County firehouses. Back then it was called the North Andrews Station. It's now Broward County Station 20. And then moved back up after school to Long Island to go to the Manhasset Lakeville Fire Department, which has always been my home department since I'm a baby, and that's still where my heart is. And I joined Rescue and Engine Company 3, and I promoted up to lieutenant, while at the same time working for ISO, covering Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, Rockland, and Putnam counties, New York, evaluating all those fire departments. So it was really a dream at that age to be able to do that. I wanted to move on. I was unable to get past the physical requirement of eyesight through the FDNY at that time. So I figured, well, you know what, I'm going to figure out what else I can do out here, where else I can go. And I was hired as a division chief in Manatee County, Florida in 1982. And I was brought on basically to put the first 911 system in for that county. So a lot of one of the work I did at ISO was involving communications and fire department operations. So it was a great fit for me. And I wasn't there a month, and one of the fire districts said that they had an opening for part-time deputy or assistant chief, I think it was at the time. So I basically did those two jobs simultaneously for 5 years. Then I decided that I wanted to be a chief of department, and that was silly. But I figured, you know, at that time I didn't realize. So I got hired, and I went through a bunch of process, and was hired in Loudoun County, Virginia. And I was there for 9 years, and we not only grew our volunteers at that time, but we also grew our career staff. And it was a great experience. Probably easily the hardest job I've ever had. Had about 20 volunteer companies, the career staff, volunteer EMS commission, volunteer fire commission, county administration. It was a real balancing act. Picture the guy at the circus with the sticks on his hands and his feet trying to circle the plates, and that's kind of what it felt like. But it was a great experience. And then got hired in Ohio for what was the Mason-Deerfield Joint Fire District, which was broken up due to political battles between the two jurisdictions, because God forbid they would focus on what's best for the public. And I was then hired by the Lovell and Sims Fire Department. I've been with Lovell and Sims, 17 years. I was brought on as battalion. I'm now deputy at Lovell and Sims, and here I am.
Still going strong.
Oh yeah, no desire to stop. I'm 62. There's no mandatory requirements to stop, and I love what I do. I love the opportunities I have, and so if I can keep this up for about another 50 years, that's the plan. So
there
we'll
you
see
go.
How that goes.
It's funny you mentioned way back at the beginning of when you were in high school and the siren would go off, how you just wanted to go chase the siren. And it reminds me of a story from my own hometown where we have junior programs where members can join at 16, and there's a couple legendary, colorful firefighters who are still active that are in their 80s now. And one in particular from a neighboring department of ours talks all the time about when he was in high school as a 16-year-old firefighter junior. The siren, of course, would go off. That's the only way they knew there were calls. No one had pagers in those days or minuters or anything like that. The principal was a volunteer in my department, Snyder Fire, and they would all go out the building together to answer the siren. And I just don't think you would see that today.
Great.
And obviously they frowned upon it when you were doing it, chasing it back in the 70s. So,
well, so the public school wouldn't let me do it. And plus I was failing miserably. I just was not a student until I went to college, and then I took fire courses, and then I did well. So it's just kind of how it worked out. But so since the public school wouldn't let me go, and my parents sent me to a private school, the private school apparently had no problem with it. I mean, they didn't have a problem with it. And we'd be in a class, and I'd hear this in the background. I'd say, shh, 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 everybody be quiet. And then I'd go running out the door, and a couple of us would go. So it was great, and
yeah,
nothing better.
Simpler times. Simpler times, for the old days, but great stuff. And, you obviously have quite you're a paid firefighter, but you've got a lot of experience on the volunteer side as well. So if you wouldn't mind, the premise of my show and what I try to do and what I've been writing and trying to present over and over again is, hey, folks, we're volunteers. And, yeah, there's paid firefighters and volunteer firefighters, but that word professional can be reserved for both. We've all got idiots in our organizations, but we've all got really good, dedicated, proficient people. And that word professional can apply to those people, paid or not paid. Do you agree, Chief?
Absolutely. So we're a primarily career department, but we have a very active volunteer component called our emergency service unit, and they are basically a volunteer company. That's one of my areas of responsibilities. And at this stage of my career, I'm essentially part-time, because I also do traveling and seminars and things like that. So I've got a very wonderful arrangement and relationship with our fire board that allows me to have a lot of flexibility. But yet I still make more fires than most of them, but we can talk about that in another seminar or another discussion. But, yeah, I mean, I've most of my career I've kicked and screamed within the volunteer fire service, and the paid as well, but our focus tonight is volunteer. And I think what we have to do is we need to start understanding that the fire company or volunteer fire department was formed to meet the need of the community. And if we keep that focus, we will continue to be successful and evolve. I think what happens, we get in trouble where we continue to, you and I long for the good old days of running out of the house when the whistle blows, but things changed. And when and sometimes we get caught, the leadership of the volunteer fire service, unfortunately, at commissioner levels or board level members levels, they are, in some cases, always focus on the way things used to be. And that's not necessarily the case. And now, look, don't go calling and getting all whiny because I'm broad brushing, because I'm not. Obviously, every department's a little bit different and stuff, but I'm giving you generally what I'm observing. Like yourself, Tom, I travel around a lot as well. And we get in trouble when, well, this is how we operate here. Well, are you operating based upon the needs of the current community? Not what was, but what is. And that means your fire department or your fire company has got to evolve in order to be able to stay alive. And that means making changes based upon the needs of the community. You were formed, again, based upon the need of the community at the time. And if you're going to continue to thrive as a volunteer or combination fire department, that means those changes need to be made. And let me give you one of my there's many examples, and we could talk about this for hours, but my favorite example is a volunteer fire department that's making several hundred or thousand runs a year, even a couple thousand runs, and they're still waiting for people to come from home. Now, I get wanting to sleep at home. I totally get that. But when you join the volunteer fire department, you volunteered yourself to follow what we think is best for your community. And that may mean instead of blowing the same whistle and blowing the same tones for the same 5 or 10% people that are showing up for all the runs, whether it's an automatic alarm or a building on fire, we share that wealth where every member does a duty rotation. And you come to the firehouse, you spend the night, you make that your drill night, and that way the first out engine is meeting the current needs of the community. Back when you were in a farming community, the farmers knew it would take, here were the volunteers. They knew it might take 10 or 15 minutes. But today, again, if you're going to be a thriving fire service, you've got to understand what the needs are. Now, what's beaten us to death? Automatic alarms, carbon monoxide alarms, all that stuff, and we could talk about that as well. But basically, you need to use this as a template. What would you want for your family? You're at work, wherever you work, and your family's home, and your fire company has to go on that run. Are they going to turn out at 10 o'clock in the morning with competent interior structural firefighters led by a boss that has a clue to deal with that situation? And again, my history speaks for itself in my support, not only in actions and in words for the volunteer fire service, but we've got to understand that we need to consider changes. Is it fair for the same 10 people to make 90% of the runs where the rest of the members continue to wear the shirts, wear the colors, the gang colors, as I call them, and get the privileges of belonging to a volunteer fire department, collecting their retirement and all that, but yet they're not pulling their weight. So I think we really, and I don't want to start on a downer, but the fact is we are reading every day about volunteer fire departments collapsing, shutting down, and being put out of service. So we got to make those changes.
Interesting. Keep the needs of the community at the forefront. That should, and so many times, internal issues and politics and even personal issues and what's in it for me can overshadow and take that over. But keep I think that's a good way to look at it. Always put the needs of the community first. What's best for the community? Getting a first due rig out fully staffed with competent, qualified firefighters. And I'm hearing more and more where as I go around, it hasn't really caught on in my area yet, but the duty nights and duty assignments seem to be becoming more and more popular. It is met with resistance. My wife or my girlfriend or my husband or my boyfriend would never go for it, is one I often hear. But those
well, you're
doing
busy.
It,
you got all that in your life.
yeah, all that. But the people doing it, I haven't heard many failure stories. I've heard people really embrace it.
Well, and so think about your loved one liking it or not. So your loved one likes you getting out of bed 4 or 5 times a week for single engine responses because nobody else is showing up, or would your loved one prefer they know every Tuesday from 6P to 6A you're on the duty crew, and the only reason you're going to get out of bed the other rest of the week is a verbal report of a box alarm, a report of a building fire.
Yes.
And you know, the commissioners
people say is the best part about it.
Well, and let me tell you something.
People that are in favor of it say that is just the best part about it.
Yeah.
When they're home, they're home.
Well, and here's the other part, is you want to get the others in your area involved in doing this. The first company that does it, and they start smoking people into their second and third due areas, the other departments are going to follow suit because, I hate to say it, but no one wants to be beat to their first alarm box area. So, again, though, what's best for the public? And, and let's face it, in the East Coast and Midwest and all over the country, there are volunteer districts and volunteer fire departments that are collecting millions in tax dollars, and they're not returning what they should to the community by at least considering a different way of operating. And it shouldn't be that tough.
No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't. And, one thing, too, you talk about the gang colors, and we all want to wear that shirt, which 99% of the time is blue. It's funny. I mean, I've heard you tell the story, and it's so true. My daughters always say, Dad, do you have any other color you can wear when we go on vacation other than blue? But anyway, we all like those gang colors. But, sometimes as volunteers we get upset when we don't get the respect we think we deserve. Well, what are you doing to earn that respect? Are you one of those, as you mentioned, 10% that's putting the time and effort in, or are you just one of the 90% collecting the T-shirt? And I just had an email today from a good friend of all of ours. I'm sure you know Tiger Schmittendorf, who's one of the recruitment and chief training officers for our area, and he got an email inquiry today from someone looking to be a volunteer firefighter, and I quote, this person said, I would like to become a volunteer firefighter, learn, and be able to contribute to my community. All right, that's awesome. That's why most of us join. The next line, I do hope one day to possibly become a real firefighter. I said, oh my gosh, I'm putting that in my presentation. But that's the stigma that sometimes we face from the public. And how do we overcome that stigma? Well, we become real firefighters by training, by taking their job seriously, and by putting things in place that are going to serve our community in a proactive way, such as getting that rig out fully staffed, equipped, and ready to go.
So let's talk for a second. You just hit a good point about training and stuff, and absolutely we have to train. But another responsibility of the leadership has got to be, how do we keep people interested? And, when I joined, we would go door to door a couple times a year doing fundraising and all sorts of things like that. Those days are over. And people get all crazy about that. But if you're a volunteer fire department and your community is not willing to pay for your service through a basic tax, you got a real issue. You should not. There's no police department that does ham and turkey dinners or barbecue roasts or boot drives to support the police department. There's no public works department that does that. So, and then people say, oh, it's great for spirit morale. Seriously? Have you talked to these young people about doing fundraising and things like that? There's no interest. They don't have the time. It's not in this society. It was in ours, but it's changed. Mm-hmm. So we got to see how we're using our volunteers' time. If they show up at a drill on Tuesday night and people stand around saying, what should we drill about tonight? You're in trouble because we've now wasted their time. We've shown failed leadership. If we're expecting to do all sorts of things in addition to being the fire department, it's a rare department that's going to survive. Now, there's some that do. For whatever reason, it's very unique to the local culture. But you're asking for somebody to donate their time. Make sure their time is worth it. Make sure that when they show up for training and you say training starts at 7 and ends at 10, that it starts at 7 and ends at 10, that there's a good drill that's tied into it, things like that. If you have a fire department meeting, of course you have to have meetings. Make sure it's not full of the same crap you've been talking about for 10 years. Figure those issues out and get them out of the way. And again, respect their time with good leadership and good planning so that their time is of value.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I say that all the time. If our members are taking, our precious members are taking the time to attend a firehouse event, whether it's a meeting or a drill or whatever else it is, make the most of their time. And training is a huge, huge stumbling block in the volunteer fire service, and I say that not as a criticism. It's a concern, but it's a concern that is constantly brought to me through my channels of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page, via emails, via face-to-face conversations with firefighters across the land. What can we do to make our training drills better? What can I do to increase attendance? And I hate it. That takes some planning and some time, but it also takes taking the role of being a training officer or a leader in your fire department seriously and putting the proper time into getting these drills ready and get off the ground.
Well, in the organization deciding what they want to be. Not every fire department, especially not every volunteer fire department, can be everything. You may not be able to do hazmat. Sure, you train at the awareness level or the first responder level, but your regional team has to be responsible for that, or the state has to be responsible. You get there, you don't make it worse. And you don't have to. EMS, you may want to do EMS, you may not. But for a volunteer firefighter to join your organization who is already got enough time and it already has enough time with family and things like that, and it's precious, time is precious, I'm going to make you go through EMT school. And I'm not amped to EMS by any means, but maybe they're not joining for that. So again, this is about looking at your organization and identifying what's best for the community, but while also looking out how you can best utilize your personnel. And you see it all over. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can go in some of the more populated areas and look and see what volunteer fire departments are survive and which ones are falling apart. And generally the ones that are surviving are the ones that are more disciplined, respect the time of the members more, have clear policies, procedures, and everybody understands that there are certain traditions as well. For example, when you join, you don't get everything your first year. You're in probation. Then you earn the right to, for example, purchase a leather helmet, or you earn the right to get your first blue T-shirt, or you earn the right just by going through Firefighter 1, or if you join the EMS side, by passing EMS, EMT, things like that. So it's kind of almost like reinventing in a little bit of the old way and a little bit of the new way, because it's not all about how we need to change. Some of the old way is good, such as earning your keep, working your way up, things like that. Well, if they have to go through that, they'll lose interest. No, they won't. They will earn that right. It'll become something very special. People crave discipline. There's 100 books written on that. And I think that that's something that's very much missing for our organizations as well these days. I'm not talking about bosses or chiefs or commissioners that are morons and being mean and nasty to people. I'm talking about we're not going to waste your time at drill night. It's going to be a good drill. You're going to walk away more trained than we were when you started. We're going to eliminate fundraising because we just don't have time for that. Okay? We're going to, when you come in for your company meeting or your department meeting, there's going to be a clear agenda. We're going to get things done, and we're going to move forward. It's adjusting while never forgetting where we came from. I think, Tom, that's probably a good way to look at it.
Yeah. What do we do? Let's talk about this new firefighter for a minute, because whatever you want to call them, millennials or Generation Z or whatever we're at today. But let's just talk about the new member, because a new volunteer member could be 40 years old or 45 years old. What do we do to hook them? In so many cases, I think they come in with expectations that it's going to be like Backdraft or Ladder 49, and in a lot of cases, it's not. And they lose interest, or they don't get a good feel for how the fire service should be. What do our leaders need to do to keep them on task and fired up and into the job?
So what I can share with you, what we do in the volunteer component of our fire department, is that and they have their own officers and things like that. We have a senior lieutenant and a first and second lieutenant, and then they oversee the 18 or so members. When anyone applies to join, that's who interviews that person. I don't get involved. The chief doesn't get involved. Now, we do a final sign-off after background checks and all that. But it's up to our members to interview, and basically it's a combination of our officers, our recruiter, and it may be, hey, Dean, are you available to help out in interviews this week? Or Mike, are you available? Or Judy, can you join us? That kind of stuff. But the consistency is that every new member talks to current members, and they explain what's going on. And these are the active members. It's not a chief. It's not a commissioner. So, therefore, they're really getting a taste of what they're going to be getting themselves into. So I think if they're going in expecting backdraft, and we didn't do a good job when we did the recruitment, and especially when we did the interview as far as helping them understand what they're going to do, what we expect out of them. And I think that's the key at the beginning. As far as the millennials, I'm taking on a different view. And one of the things our chief has done from time to time is in our officers' meetings, which is the department officers, he will either play a video or we'll look at something on the internet about people. Nothing to do with firefighters, but we have got a lot of young firefighters, a lot of young firefighters in our department. So we need to understand what the millennials are looking for. And more the research is telling us that this younger generation, and you may think what you want based upon somebody you know or don't know, but they want to feel valued, and that sounds very huggy-kissy, and maybe it is. But who doesn't? I mean, how many times have you been to a volunteer fire department meeting where you get there and they're talking about the same crap they did 20 years ago, or you go to a drill and they're deciding which video they want to play this week? So feeling valued, feeling appreciated, feeling like you make a difference, I think is really key. And there's enough people out there studying that stuff to tell us that. But is it all that different than we looked for when we joined? When we joined, we didn't care. Bullshit. We did care. We want to feel valued. We want to feel like those colors we are wearing mean something.
Absolutely. And you want, and I think it goes both ways too. I always say, I hear from older members, the former chiefs, former commissioners, or just long-time tenured members, that the new members don't respect them, so they don't come around anymore. And I think there's a two-way street there. I think the older tenured members need to learn how to respect the newer members and pass on their wisdom and knowledge. And the newer members need to learn how to respect what these older members can offer. And there's got to be a happy median there. And I think sometimes we really have trouble in our firehouses finding or identifying that happy median between the two age groups.
Well, I think, if an older member, quote, doesn't feel respected, there's a significant issue, and the specific organization needs to be looked at. But I think what you want to do is when you get a new member new member Johnny joins the fire company, you identify which lieutenant or captain is going to mentor that firefighter, and then which senior officer or ex-commissioner or ex-chief is going to also be the backup mentor. So for every one member, you get two members. You get a relatively, a very engaged, active, current officer who's riding the front seat, and then you take that 20 or 30-year, 40-year member, and you say, okay, Senior Firefighter Joe, Lieutenant Smith, you guys are going to be working with Johnny, and Johnny's your responsibility. And so when it's time to walk Johnny around the truck and show him the equipment, why wouldn't you have that senior person do that? So, again, it's about feeling valued and being engaged and respecting that. And again, the older members
both
need to
feel
understand.
valued.
Yeah. And the older members need to understand, you know what, it ain't your time anymore. So this is still a time of you giving. We gave you your badge. We gave you your watch. We love you. Here's your gold front piece as a chief. But if you're going to stay involved, here's a role for you. And too often we see ex-chiefs, former commissioners, just kind of pushed out of the way, and that's not a good thing by any means. Whether you're involved in the IFC, the IFC has a former president's council where every president of the IFC sits in this council to give advice to the current president. Or I'll pick a volunteer fire department in Long Island, the Freeport Fire Department, where every ex-chief that's active still carries a radio and still can outrank a captain at the scene because they value all those years of experience and they're not blown off. In other words, you don't just get that if you're not active. But if you're active, even though you go out of office, you stay engaged, you still have status within the organization. And it's about taking care of people. Not all that tough.
Wow. Never heard that one before, where an ex-chief will outrank a captain. Interesting, and I can see the merit. I can see if it's done respectfully, if everyone's understands, what the purpose of it is there. I could see that working, but I can also see where it's probably controversial too when some people think about it. So,
well, I think if you bring it into a department that hasn't done it before, but again, if it's been the tradition, now it makes perfect sense. So. I mean, there are volunteer fire departments where you could have 2 years on the fire department and get elected lieutenant. Okay, so you're elected lieutenant.
Absolutely.
Now you're riding the front seat with absolutely no qualifications. So add a few more years to that, so you've got 5 years, and now you're a company captain. And here comes an ex-chief who's got 30 years in the company. You want him to be in command. You need him to be in command. You don't have that experience. You don't have that training. But again, now they just don't get that radio and that status without staying active, without making their drills, without making their training. But it doesn't put them out to pasture unless they want to be put out to pasture. So, again, we saw a line of duty death in New York State recently where the captain was 19 or 20 years old. I mean, with due respect, I need an ex-chief to show up at that fire because no matter how many classes you've taken, no matter how good you may be, you don't have the age to command that fire. Okay, so, I mean, I'm not picking on any department or anything, but don't, just so we can, I know you have so much you want to talk about tonight, don't put your old members out to pasture once their offices go to.
Right. You know what I'd like to do, too, or I've heard of departments doing is, I'm big on history and preserving your history, and it shocks me how many departments don't have a well-preserved history, but those that do, in many cases they have a wall of past chiefs, past presidents, even past members, or former members that are still serving are on that wall, and it's nice to take the new member, the probies, the newer, and walk them by those photos and identify key players, especially ones that are still active. Yes, highlight those that have passed on and contributed to make you a great department, but that's a great opportunity to say, see this guy here or this gal here? She was a past chief. She's still very active. You should listen to what she has to say. She will take care of you. That's a great way to build respect for a senior member when new members join a department.
Well, and if you go to this day to my old firehouse, Company 3 in Manhasset Lakeville, there's a picture of me and many, many others up on the wall, and it shows, when you look at it, you get the breadth of the depth of this fire company, how many years it's been around, how long people have been involved, who's been involved. And a lot of areas when you're an ex-chief, you're front piece on your You may go back to wearing black gear, but your front piece says ex-chief on it. There's lots of little dirt cheap ways of recognizing people's good. And all that good combined then shows some legacy in the organization, and people want to belong to an organization with a positive legacy.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. And I just want to take a minute and remind our listeners that you are listening to Fire Engineering Talk Radio and to this episode of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. And tonight's show is sponsored by the Honeywell DuPont FDIC Scholarship Program. You can go on to Honeywell DuPont FDIC Scholarship.com and nominate somebody you think is deserving for a full ride, a full scholarship to FDIC 2018, which will be April 23rd to the 28th. And that scholarship encompasses airfare, hotel, registration, food stipend, everything. So please, think about someone you think is deserving, because FDIC is a great training event and networking event. And again, it's Honeywell DuPont FDIC Scholarship.com, and we thank Honeywell DuPont so much for providing those scholarships. And we are talking with Chief Billy Goldfeder. If anybody would like to call in, have a question for the Chief, or contribute to the conversation, please feel free to do so. We don't bite. The number is 760-454-8852, and we would love to hear from you if you had anything for the Chief. And Chief, I want to ask you a question because it's near and dear to me. You mentioned in your introductory bio how you moved down to Florida to help put a 911 center online many years ago. And that was near and dear to me because my paid job is I work in a fire alarm office, and I'm still very proud of the fact that we are a fire alarm office. We do fire and EMS. We do not do police, so we can concentrate on taking care of the first responders that are firefighters and EMS providers. And you've had some really good articles and really good editorials and comments, and even at seminars, talking about what makes a good dispatch center. And I agree with you 100%. I would just like to talk a little bit about some of the dispatch problems that are out there, and that's namely delayed responses, because there's a lot of keystrokes that need to be entered on a computer before they can get trucks rolling, and that can be a real problem. And we've seen instances where it has been a real problem.
Well, the leadership of fire departments need to get engaged with the local communication center, whether it's their own or regional. And, you know, as I've spent a considerable amount of my career involved in communications on both sides of it, and a couple of years ago I kind of locked horns with a local communications director and had to remind him that he has two groups of customers. It's the agencies he serves and the public. And that doesn't mean every agency is entitled to have their own procedures. That makes me crazy. A car fire in District A gets this, but a car fire in District D gets that. Get your shit together. Figure out what you want countywide as an organization. Make it easier for the dispatchers. And we could have a whole radio show just on that. But as far as the dispatchers and their role, the other part is the leadership of the communication center needs to understand they're trying to fix too much with one solution, and that often falls into the CAD problem. Well, this is a great police CAD, so we're going to go with that because they do so many more calls than fire, and we also have a fire module for that. Well, we need to keep in mind that 90% of police calls have already happened. They're not in progress. A very few amount of police calls are in progress, whereas 90% of fire and EMS calls are in progress. They're having their heart attack now. They got struck by a car now. The house is on fire now. So if we focus on in-progress calls for police and fire, if you have to have a CAD that does both, then you sometimes can get through it a lot quicker. The only thing a dispatch center needs to activate a fire department is where is it, what is it, what's your phone number? Where is it, what is it, what's your phone number? And the tones can go out. We then, once the tones are processed, we can then carry on conversation with the caller with all the other Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and all the other kind of questions we may want to have. But the idea is you've got to alert the fire department. I locked horns many years ago with some of the providers of the caller assist systems, and most of them now are a lot more flexible. But it used to be where you got to answer all these questions, and the person's still choking, or the house is filled with smoke. I mean, I can tell you this. the fastest way ever to get the fire department was the pull box. There were no questions. You pull the box, and the fire department responded. It was pretty simple. Even today, you may be better off having an automatic alarm in your home than actually dialing 911 to call for the fire department. Because if it's an automatic alarm, there's no questions. The tones are dropped because there's an automatic alarm at 123 Maple Avenue. But you call up some of these dispatch centers, and I think I smell smoke in my house. Well, what floor is it on? What type of smoke are you smelling? Did you leave? Send the fire department. Get the tones out. Now, some fire departments will say, we want to know all those questions. Really? Have you gone to your communications center and looked at your call processing times? You really need to go look at it. And call processing is from the time the dispatch center answers the 911 call to the time your agency is notified. And if it's taking more than about a minute, you got problems. And I've recently worked with an agency or a county up in Wisconsin where they were looking at 4 and 5 minute call processing times. You couldn't believe the amount of questions were being asked. I mean, on one car fire, this person was asked the make of the car, is it powered by alternative fuel? Stop, dispatch the fire department. Then we can spend time answering all the other questions. So where is it? What is it? Give me your phone number. Push a button in CAD. Okay, ma'am, the fire department's being alerted. I have a few other questions for you. Kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. And you know what it takes, too? And one of the reasons that sometimes there's delays is it's staffing. And even we're talking volunteer fire departments, but now this might be a paid part of the operation. And what gets cut a lot is staffing. And you might have one poor person doing both dispatch and the phone. And, boy, that can lead to delays, especially when multiple calls come in for the fire or 2 different calls or 3 different calls going on. That can be a problem.
Well,
but
Tom,
I can tell you,
it's no different than a volunteer fire department. At some point, you need to decide are you going to be a fire department or not. If you're going to be a fire department, decide what you're going to do, what you're going to staff, what your times are going to be, and make your model work that way. We're going to guarantee that during the day we'll have 10 people around. We're going to use, I am responding or active 911 or something to make sure we know our members are coming in. Same thing with the communication center. If you're going to be a 911 center, be a 911 center. Follow the national standards. Make sure you've got adequate staffing. Pay the people a decent rate. Train them well. Provide them with good leadership. Understand the burnout problem in communications. And you'll wake up one day and say, wow, we've got a good communication center meeting the need of the community. What happens is they want to cut here, they want to cut here. We could do 2 less people on midnight. Great, you're 2 less people, and 95% of the time it's going to work out until you have an active shooter, until you've got a transportation emergency, until you got a bus overturned. And now the media wants to, this lady said she called and was put on hold. Well, of course she was put on hold because we don't have enough people. Why not? And here we go.
Yeah, it's like insurance. You're paying for something that you
Exactly.
may never need, but boy, if you need it, you're glad you're paying for it, right?
Exactly.
I can tell
That's
you,
right. Yeah.
I tell you, just to give a quick war story here, I'm very fortunate that our dispatcher center is adequately staffed. Now, adequately staffed is usually 2 people on duty, but I have seen firsthand where a cardiac arrest call comes in, a choking call comes in, a fire comes in, and one dispatcher answers a call, the other's dispatching. The dispatching dispatcher, the one who's hitting the tone, sees that address, knows which fire company to send, and while the dispatcher on the phone is still asking some important questions, the other dispatcher's already sending the fire department, and it works fantastic. And so
probably one of the greatest. And one of my favorite stories is in Loudoun County, Virginia. Probably some of the best dispatchers I ever worked with. But what they did there is they hired mostly volunteer firefighters, so they were into the job. They loved being, they were into it, and they took such pride in processing their calls an average of 30 seconds. And if David was on the phone saying, "Where's that fire, ma'am?" Pete picked up the phone, was listening in on that particular call, and Pete was loading up the alarm box as we're getting ready to transmit that call, getting the tones lined up, just like you described.
Yeah, yeah, it's so important, and it's important for people to get to know how their center works. Go visit your communication center, get to know the dispatchers, understand the job they do, because they take a beating, sometimes deservedly so, but they want to do a good job, and sometimes their hands are tied by policy, by leadership, by bureaucratic boondoggle, I call it in some cases. And you're right, with the scripted questions, it really sometimes border on lunacy.
Well, and I think you made a great point. I don't think any volunteer career, of course, but volunteer, that's our focus of tonight's program, should ever finish probation without an 8-hour stint in the communications center. How are you going to be in the fire department without understanding what happens up in the alarm room or in the communications center? And you need to spend that time. And for communication centers that hire people with no fire background or no EMS background, how do you let those people do that job without them spending time out on a busy engine company or a busy EMS unit? It's again, that's failed leadership if we're not doing that, and it's so easy and it costs nothing to do.
Right. And it helps. You get to know each other too. You know the voices, and you get to know who people are, and it builds camaraderie. You're all one unit. You're all working together. And what'd you say at the beginning of the show? For the betterment of the community. What's best for the community? A fluid communication
it's like our mutual
center fire
partners.
department relationship. That's what I wanted to get into next. That's that perfect segue, Chief, into what's another problem that we identify in the volunteer fire service. And I talk about this. I tell little stories in my presentation, but I might be exaggerating a little bit. But let me ask you, Chief, because you've certainly been out there a lot more than me. You have a lot more experience in this. How many times do you hear, well, I'm not going to work with my neighboring department because 25 years ago, the chief's mother's father, sister's aunt's brother's mother said a nasty word to my brother-in-law's sister's mother? Right? I mean, I know it sounds stupid, but things like that happen. It's ridiculous. What's best for the community?
It ain't up to you. That's my response. It ain't up to you. You may think it is, and maybe even legally it is, but morally you're going to get jammed up, and maybe in court you're going to get jammed up. How do you explain to your family if your family has a fire and you're at work, okay, and your volunteer fire department is called out, and you don't call the neighboring department mutual aid instead, department that's further away, but because you like them, and now your own fire, you have to deal with the consequences of your stupid actions. So you don't like your neighbors, that's fine. Don't invite them to Christmas dinner. Don't exchange Christmas cards. I don't care about that. But if you've got a department that's close or closer that can make a difference, why wouldn't you? You owe it to your firefighters. You owe it to your community. And I'm not saying that they're replacing your service or anything like that, and I'm not talking about mutual aid. Mutual aid is when a volunteer fire department continually fails to get out on a run, and they rely on a neighboring department to continue to bail them out. I'm not talking about that. That's a whole other issue. That's when your department has to decide if you're a fire department or not. But I'm talking about a good, coordinated, collaborative response amongst an area, a region, a battalion, a district, whatever you want to call it, where you're sending lots of equipment quickly to ensure the people having the emergency get the help they need. But also, if your firefighters have an emergency at that scene, you've got enough staffing there. If your volunteer fire department knows, and you know it as well as I do, what your daytime staffing is or whatever your poorest time is, if you can only turn out 3 to 5 people during the day, and you know you can do that because you're using some sort of a system that your members acknowledge that they're on their way to the firehouse or whatever it is, and you know you can only turn out 3 to 5 people, there's nothing wrong with that. That means your fire department is capable of putting 1 engine or 1 truck on the road. Reach out to your neighbors and create a box alarm system, whereas they're also being sent, so you can put 25, 30 people on a first alarm. Now, I'm not talking about an automatic alarm, okay? And we have to work on statistics. Well, somebody will say, what if it's a fire? I understand what if, but let's just talk reality. Okay, the reality is most cases the automatic alarm is not going to be a fire. So an automatic alarm, the first due district, and maybe the neighboring mutual aid department may want to work out an arrangement where you each put 2 companies on the road or whatever your standard of cover is. The next level of a first alarm assignment would be somebody says they smell smoke. Do you see smoke? No, I smell something. In that case, you may want to put maybe 3 engines and a truck on the road, okay? And then, so that'll give you 12, 13, 14, maybe 14, 15 people. And then the next level is somebody calls up, they see smoke, they see fire. Well, you want a full Marine Corps response, as I call it, a full box alarm. And you can calculate by building what you need by address. For example, a 1,000 square foot single-family dwelling is going to require, based upon the fire flow, 3 inch and 3/4 lines, somebody on the hydrant, 2 or 3 firefighters per hand line, ventilation crew, search crew, command, all that. So figure out your people. In the newer part of your town, maybe your homes are 10,000 square feet or 8,000 square feet. Well, and that's a non-hydrated area. Okay, so now what are you going to do about water supply? You're going to put 1 tanker on the road for a 10,000 square foot house, or are you going to put 7 or 8 tankers on the road? Again, for that reported fire. Somebody say, oh my God, 8 or 10 tankers. What are you trying to do? I said, I'm trying to establish water is what I'm trying to do. I mean, I don't know what you're trying to do, but I need that kind of water. And who knows where your fill sites are? And what's your ladder access? Maybe the back of the house is 4 stories. Do you have a 35 or 45 or 50 banger ladder where you can actually throw it back there because the trucks don't have access? What I'm talking about, Tom, is planning ahead. And get past the emotion, get past the who likes who or who's banging who or whoever did what to who or whatever. I don't care about that. Act like a fire department and do what's best for the people having that emergency. And that staffing issue can be solved because odds are, if your department's having staffing problems, your neighboring department may be having the same problem. So by joining forces while still maintaining that ever critical independency that volunteer fire departments enjoy, and I get it, I understand that, do what's best for the people having the fires. And besides, who doesn't want to go to a fire? I mean, I'm not being goofy here, but we like going to fires. So if you know that you're going to be working with your neighbors and going on mutual aid fires on a first alarm basis, that's going to foster interest in training. By the departments training together, that's going to improve relations, and it kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah, bury the ego. Bury the ego and do what's right for your community. And I always say, you know what? Go have a cup of coffee with the neighboring leaders and hammer it out and get it done ahead of time. And like you said, you start doing that, you're training together. It's more training opportunities, more drills. You got the big one there, Chief?
Hold on, I'm resetting the pager. Yeah, we have a box. But I'm not even listening to it.
You don't need to run out?
No, we're fine.
I know
if it's a working fire,
then we'll cut it short. Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be done.
Mutual aid is so important today in the volunteer fire service, and it can be a really good thing. And but I like what you said too about having a level of common sense there too, where adequate mutual aid as far as don't burn out the neighbor, the mutual aid, as you called it, for these box alarms and automatic alarms. We can have a common sense approach to that, like you said, basing it on statistics. Yes, the automatic alarms can turn into
Tom,
a real
quick,
fire.
Based upon your dispatcher. Your dispatchers know if you're going to a fire or not. 99% of the time they know. So give them a little bit of freedom. If you're getting multiple calls, strike my second alarm. If you're getting this, do it. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, dispatcher's discretion. We like to call that, and that's all working as a team and having respect for each other and training people correctly as well. That gets back to the dispatch center, bringing people on board and training them the right way. And there's a lot of merit to that. And it's just so important. People bury the ego, work with your neighbors. It's what the community wants. The person whose house just had a fire doesn't want to hear that you skipped over a closer department due to some long ago issue or problem or personality conflict. They want you to be what, Chief? They want you to be professional. They want you to be a professional firefighter and a professional leader. So absolutely.
And they're paying for the service. I mean, they're paying taxes, or if you're doing fund drive, then that's their investment. I mean, they're still paying for the service. You didn't buy your own trucks. You didn't build your own building. So they're entitled to a level of service that a reasonable person should expect. And that means enough people to do the establish water, force the door, do a search, get water on the fire, provide a backup line. You people know all this stuff. We just need to focus on it. And too often we're relying on, luckily it didn't turn out to be anything. Luckily it didn't, but one day, man, that wheel of fortune's going to hit. It's not going to be good.
Yeah. Chief, you mentioned this earlier, and I wanted to bring it up, and I forgot, but you just mentioned it again, the tax money thing. Now, I'm very fortunate, and I think obviously, in the New York area, we're very lucky to have tax-funded equipment and firehouses, but that's not always the case around our country, is it? There's a lot of areas that have to have that chicken barbecue to purchase that truck or the necessary equipment. And I don't know what the answer is there. People sometimes say to me, how can they get that changed? How can they – I don't know what the answer is for that because this is what I grew up with. This is what I know. I have a tax rate that's $1 1,000 that pays for pretty much every piece of equipment my volunteer department needs. So that's a luxury I have that certainly is not enjoyed in a lot of parts of our country, is it?
No, and I get the turkey dinner and stuff, and I do understand that has to be done in some areas. I scratch my head because the police department's not doing it, the roadway department's not doing it, the state highway patrol's not doing it, so there's got to be a way to fund a local fire department. Another thing is the Fire Act grants. While overall it's been a very successful program, we continue to see money going to departments that are good at writing grants, and departments who are incapable of writing a good grant doesn't get a piece of equipment. And there probably ought to be a better way in solving that kind of a problem. The last thing any department in a taxed, well-funded area needs is a Fire Act grant where they can afford to do it, but yet we see rural departments. And in many cases, some of these rural departments go into more working fires than some of these suburban departments ever think about going to, and they're using 30-year-old trucks and old bunker gear and stuff like that. So there are some solutions. I'm not sure exactly what they are, though.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate for those areas that really need to rely on that for their main source of income. And my hat goes off to them because they're making it work and they're working hard. But like you said, there comes a point where I think we have to re-examine how we're doing things, really. And
state, local government. I mean, again, it gets to the point: do you want a fire department or not? And it may be reverting back to where people in the community join. Lots of people join. So who knows?
Yeah. Hey, Chief, I got a few more things to talk about. You doing good on time? You okay?
Yeah. Nothing's showing at the body shop, so I'm good.
Okay. Nothing showing? Okay. All right. Just as a reminder, folks, you're listening to Fire Engineering Talk Radio. And tonight's episode, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. So glad to have you listening in. And if anyone has a question for the Chief, again, the number 760-454-8852. And Chief, I wanted to ask you about your experience writing the 2 books, the Pass It On books, which if anyone doesn't know, I'm going to let you talk about those a little bit because, wow, there's some great stories, some great insights, some great leadership lessons, and great advice in those 2 books. And I'd like you to talk about the experience writing those because definitely got me some I have pages of notes I've taken from those 2 books.
So, I've had an amazing, wonderful career, life, and all that sort of stuff. And I remember in the early 80s when a magazine editor of a magazine that doesn't exist anymore told me to find something else to do because I can't write. And it turned out that I can. It's just I write my way and I write the way I talk, and I was very blessed with that, and I love to write. And that's pretty much one of my most important way of communicating with people today is through Firefighter Close Calls or the Secret List or the columns, Nozzlehead or Close Calls or and Firehouse or Nozzlehead and Fire Rescue Fire Engineering and stuff like that. But so they primarily Penwell, who's fire engineering and FDIC, had asked, what about writing a book? And this is years ago, and I really didn't think that that's something I wanted to do. I mean, do we really need another book on how to stretch a nozzle or work a hearse tool? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of them out there. And I have no qualifications to write about things like people such as Vinnie Dunn write about high-rise buildings or tenements and things like that. So I really kind of put in the back of my mind. So I was on a flight somewhere, going to do a seminar someplace, and I was looking at Esquire magazine, and Esquire magazine every month, and it has a column called What I Know, and they ask famous people to share their life's thoughts. And I said, bingo, that's the book. So I reached back out to them, and I said that here's my proposal, and I wrote up a whole proposal on what I wanted to do, and basically I wanted to figure out a way to pass good stuff on. Almost everything I know in the fire service, somebody else taught it to me or I experienced it. There's a lot of people that I've gotten to know over my career, and I'm very lucky because of that. And there's a lot of great people out there who I know, but other people may not have the opportunity to know, and that kind of formulated this. So I reached out. Fire Engineering, or Penwell said, absolutely, let's do this. And I said that, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to 100 or so friends, or 150 or whatever, and they were given parameters, no more than 1,000 to 1,500 words, but you could say anything you want. That was it. Say whatever you want, whether it's a probie, whether it's a firefighter, whatever. And it was a letter that went out, and I told them exactly what I was looking for. And it came back with just amazing amounts of just amazing. I can't even. There's so much good stuff in these books. And what I did was, because I'm asking people to pass it on and share. So I said, let's do this as a fundraiser. So the first book, Pass It On, What We Know, What We Want You to Know, all the royalties that I would get as an author were donated 50-50 between the Chief Ray Downey Scholarship and the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. Now, the Ray Downey Scholarship is very important to me, not only because the chief was killed on 9/11, but there was a moment in my life, and I don't even think I wrote about it. I was at FDIC years ago, and I hear this guy say, "Hey, Billy," I turn around, it's God, it's Ray Downey. And then when I say God, obviously some of you know that was his nickname.
Yeah.
Yes,
and
I'm like, and it's one of those, I look behind me like he must be talking to some other Billy. And I said, "What's up, Chief?" He says, "So what do you think about something?" And he just wanted to talk to me about something. I'm like, "What the hell is he talking to me for?" And it absolutely blew me away that this guy who, how to even describe him, was interested in my opinion on something. So I thought, you know what, we need to give back. And so that's what we did. The first book was crazy popular, bestseller. We've made tens of thousands of dollars for those two organizations. And so we then did Pass It On to the Second Alarm 2 years later, and equally popular. And I added the Firefighter Cancer Support Network as a recipient to receive the royalties. To be clear, there's no money to be made here. Every time we get a royalty check, we deposit it, and Terry writes the check exactly for one-third to those organizations. And we do that, every 6 months or whenever we get the royalty checks. So considering there's not a lot of royalty made on these books, we'll just leave it at that with due respect to Penn or anybody else, we've sold a lot of books to be able to donate all this money to those organizations. And I just this week we're sending out 3 $1,500 checks, and those are low. We'll see it go way up around the holidays and things. So the book is nonprofit. The books are available through Penwell, through Amazon. Just Google Pass It On with my name, or Firefighter Pass It On, or whatever, and maybe you can link it on your Facebook. But with the holidays coming up, they make a great gift. And again, I promise you, to your listeners, you will absolutely love these books. And if you know a firefighter, you love a firefighter, you got a divorced firefighter, but you still talk to each other, whoever it is, if they don't have these books, and we are working on the third and final version of it, which will probably be
chance for a third alarm. It's going to be a third alarm.
Yeah,
19. Strike a third.
Yeah, and FDIC 2019 is the discussed plan right now.
Fantastic, and I can definitely vouch for the two books, Chief, having read them both, and it's not just all paid departments either, people. There's some great volunteer firefighters out there that have contributed to the book, and a lot of great lessons for anybody in the fire service, but even volunteer firefighters. There's some great lessons there. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I mean we really focus, just very quickly. We focus on diversity from Big C. You know, Kevin Apuzio's dad wrote a chapter. You mentioned about Kevin Apuzio earlier, who was killed in New Jersey. Fire officers, chiefs, big cities, big names from Alan Bernascini to John Buckman to Harry Carter to Bill Guston and Gordon Graham. I mean, the Downey brothers, to people you may not have heard of, and just so much. And again, I didn't write the book. All I did was edit it and write one chapter of my own. And Harry Carter likes to say that I got 100 of my best friends to write a book for me, and essentially that's what I did. Whatever.
Yeah. Chief, you mentioned Kevin Apuzio, and if you wouldn't mind, if we could take a minute just to talk about the story of Kevin and also the story of his father coming up to you. I believe it was at the National Fallen Firefighters Memorial soon after he died. But and then I mentioned earlier I had a chance to meet the chief of the department, Dan Krasinski, this past summer, and he said it's so important to keep the story out there because the chief said he considered his department just a typical volunteer fire department. And you know what? It happened to them, and it can happen to anybody. So if you wouldn't mind, I hope you could take a minute just so we can do Kevin the honor he so deserves by keeping his name alive and making people understand who he was and what he did.
Yeah, so it was an early morning fire call. Danny pulls up in his chief's car. The husband's screaming. My wife's inside. Automatic mutual aid companies are already on the way. The East Franklin Fire Department's first due company pulls up. There's a crew on there. Kevin's part of the crew. This happened so quickly. Heavy smoke conditions. Man screaming, his wife's inside. He's covered in soot, so obviously he just got out. So they decide to go in because that's what we do when they tell us somebody's inside. There literally was no time for an in-depth 360. There were some physical barriers as well. But again, the husband's screaming. This is when we're willing to take that risk. So Kevin and the crew go and they stretch a line, and they get off the rig with everything right. Fully geared up, no exposed double imaging cameras, car shows, line hand tools, etc. Because that's the way Danny Krasinski runs the East Franklin Volunteer Fire Department. It's a very disciplined, a very strict volunteer fire department with a lot of pride. And if you're riding in this seat, you do this. If you're riding in that seat, you do that. So anyway, they did their thing. They get in there. They go down the hall. They find the lady. Kevin, they announce on the radio, we got the lady. We're on our way out. They're on their way out. They're stretching out. Or rather, they're stretching the victim, pulling the victim out. And about 3 feet from the front door, the floor drops, and a couple of firefighters, Kevin and the lady, go tumbling into where was this working fire. This basement was rocking. Danny was able to help get out. I mean, just now as the mutual aid companies are coming in, including the paid City of New Brunswick, of which the East Franklin Volunteer Fire Department and the paid Union New Brunswick Fire Department have excellent relations. As a matter of fact, the East Franklin Volunteers are on all second alarms into the City of New Brunswick. There's a lot of respect for a variety of reasons because they've developed those relations like we talked about earlier. So the floor drops through, and the chief is able to actually pull out some of the firefighters, but Kevin and the lady perished and literally burned to death in that fire. All reports that came out after that fire indicate that they did what any good fire department, well-led, well-trained, well-disciplined fire department would have done. And sometimes we lose our lives, which is something I truly believe in. I know there are those out there that zero line of duty deaths, and that's a goal. But understand there are times where we must take great risk, and that's what Kevin did. And Kevin died truly as a hero with a lady in his arms. And so when I got to know Kevin's dad, and we've been friends since that death, I got to know him literally. I was in St. Louis when the fire occurred, doing a class there, and I finished up, went home, got my uniform, and headed to New Jersey and spent the rest of the week there. Because Danny and these folks were friends of mine well before this fire. So I got a chance that night to meet Kevin's dad when I got there, and we became friends. And again, at the memorial service, he made a comment that it's so sad that so many firefighters died the way they did. Joe Bubba Smith, 500 pounds, 5'3", died of a heart attack. Well, who would have predicted that, right? I mean, come on. And that was an unnecessary death. Or the firefighter who drove drunk, or the firefighter didn't buckle in, or the firefighter that was doing something he wasn't trained to do, or the firefighter standing in a collapse zone, and on and on and on and on. Kevin's dad made the observation, at least my son was doing something he was supposed to be doing, and he was in the process of genuinely saving someone's life. Where it's difficult, I don't understand how some of these other families can deal with the fact that their loved one did not have to die. And that's kind of the story that you and I are talking about.
Right. And when you get down to it, how do you explain to someone's loved one that their firefighter spouse or firefighter husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever, their firefighter loved one died, and for lack of a better word, unnecessarily, simply because they didn't buckle up, or simply because they didn't take care of themselves or drive prudently? And I like how you so eloquently say, Chief, and you even did a video on it, think of who's in your wallet and who you want to go home to. And if you don't buckle up or don't take care of yourself for any other reason, there's a lot of reasons you should, but let's think of who's in your wallet, who's depending on you to come home.
That's why I spend some time talking to younger fire officers and even senior fire officers. And a lot of times the peer pressure gets to you where you don't want to confront a crew, confront a firefighter. And screw that. Look through that. Look at the pictures that are in their iPhone, their wallet, or whatever. And the next time firefighters want what they're supposed to, that means once they're trained, once there's policy, and they know damn well what they should and shouldn't be doing. If a firefighter puts you in a position of you doing your job, do your job. And confront them. And if you have to look beyond them, think about their wife, their kid, their husband, whoever. And that will motivate you in order to deal with those problems. And that came, again, that wasn't my idea. I had a deputy chief a million years ago when I was with Hassel Lakeville, Eddie Bennett, who said, don't get upset when those people force you to do your job. If they're not wearing an SCBA, they're not buckled in, they forced you to do your job. You shouldn't feel bad about that at all. And that really stuck with me my whole career.
Yeah, as it should. And you mentioned that National Volunteer Firefighters Memorial. I believe the weekend is next weekend, right? You're heading back down here. You want to talk about that a little bit and what that's all about?
It's all career and volunteer. Yeah, it's the National Fallen Firefighter Memorial Service this weekend coming up in Emmitsburg. If you trust me on this, if you're within driving distance, make a trip to Emmitsburg this weekend. At least come down Sunday morning to the National Fire Academy. It's a ceremony you'll never forget. While it is certainly a serious ceremony, it will make you beam with pride being a firefighter. As Rick Lasky talks about, the pride and joy of being a firefighter. Well, go to the memorial service and join us there, and you'll really recharge your battery as well.
Fantastic. So keep that in mind, people. It's October 7th and 8th this weekend, National Fallen Firefighter Memorial Weekend, honoring firefighters who gave their lives last year, and well worth a visit. I myself have never had a chance to go there, but it's definitely on my list of things that I would like to do someday. And Chief, I just had a couple other quick things. If you still got a few minutes, are you still okay hanging out with me for a few more minutes? So I really appreciate your time. And again, one last chance. Anybody wants to call in? Again, we do not bite, right, Chief? We don't bite. We're open to phone calls. 760-454-8852 if anyone would like to call in. Chief, a couple last-minute things I want to talk to you about, and I know you've touched on this before in your writing, so I know you're pretty passionate about it. We talk about the volunteer fire service. We are steep in tradition, and in some cases, unfortunately, that tradition can cross the line. I'm talking about bullying. I'm talking about harassment. I'm talking about prejudices that might exist, and if we want to truly have a professional operation, we need to understand that there is no tolerance for bullying and harassment in any organization today. But my gosh, our volunteer firehouses absolutely cannot have that. And there's nothing wrong with pro-beat chores. There's nothing wrong with pro-beat expectations. But there's a lot wrong with bullying and harassment. And some of the stories the last few years that have come out they're criminal, and people have been prosecuted, but just unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's pretty simple, and I mean, there's no better way to say it. I'll use firehouse language. Don't be an asshole. I mean, how do you want your child treated? How do you want your daughter treated, your wife, your kid treated in the firehouse? Your kid joins the fire department. How do you want them treated? And understand today that there's going to be strict consequences. I think probably one of the best ways to start, though, is by a policy. What's your policy? Some fire departments develop their own. Some folks use Lexipol, Gordon Graham's program. Lexipol provides policies for fire departments. You know, and there's an easy way to kind of get moving on that. But you got to have policy. What's the policy? What that does is it makes it where Johnny and Janie and Mary and Sam and Joe and Ruthie are all treated the same, and that's probably the best way to start. Then once you have policy, you train your members on that policy. This applies everything from bullying to behaviors to tactics and operations. Once they're trained on it, then there's no real excuse for them not to behave a certain way. And again, it's not a free-for-all. And the other end of the coin, the other side of the coin is, and I understand that officers get nervous these days because if you're too tough, you're afraid someone's going to accuse you of something. I've been there. I was accused decades ago of something that I never did, and I was cleared and all that stuff. But I was accused of harassing people. I wasn't harassing them. I was making them come to work on time. I was making them attend training. I was making them wear SCBAs and making them not drive like morons. And so they said, screw you. We don't like you. And two of these people went after me, and it worked out, but it sucked. But it didn't stop me from that point on from continuing to be a tough policy enforcer. That's my job. I've been a chief since 1982, and my job is to enforce the policy when necessary. But my first job is to develop policy. My second is to train them on it. If you do that, rarely will you have to enforce the policy. And that's kind of how it works. Again, don't be a moron. You hear about these people doing things to each other in the firehouse. It's atrocious.
Yeah, there's been some horrendous stories, and it's a black eye to, not just the volunteer fire service, the fire service in general. And it's a nasty world today. We shouldn't be nasty to each other in our firehouses, that's for sure. And I think people have trouble with policies. I think people have trouble developing and implementing. And then maybe what they do is they have policies and they get stuck in a binder somewhere and nobody even knows they exist. So I like what you say about you have to train on it. You have to train on it, and you have to remind people and do ongoing training and reminders. And I'm a big fan of newsletters in the volunteer firehouse to keep people apprised as to what's going on. And nothing wrong with once a month in your department newsletter reviewing one of your policies and working it into some training drills as well. So policies are tough for departments.
They take a lot of time, and they are tough. But you can't have a policy of everything. I mean, but once you have a set of policies that are legal and tested and all that kind of stuff, remember, you can't just have a policy because you want to have one, Chief. I mean, you may want to have one that says you'll always lay out from a hydrant to the fire, and that's fine. But there's a fire chief in another state in the Midwest who put a policy that female firefighters are not allowed to breastfeed their children on duty. You can't say that. There's a law that says they can. So that's where we kind of get in trouble, pretending that we're experts in areas that we're not. And again, that's why, I push very hard for people to either develop your own based upon what best practices are, what the laws are, or consider, without sounding like I'm trying to get a cheap dig in, but my partner, Gordon Graham, has developed a wonderful program. My partner in firefighter close calls, Gordon Graham, developed what's called the Lexipol system, and it allows fire departments to, it doesn't run itself, but allows you to ensure that your members are trained on their policies. It uses modern programs such as an app. Weekly, your members are checked off on. It's just an amazing program. And again, I don't want to do a cheap ad here, but if you're interested, contact me and I'll send you information. But it really does solve the problem, especially for volunteer fire departments where chiefs and commissioners change on a regular basis, but you want your policies to stay the same.
Yeah, I was going to talk to you about your good friend Gordon Graham. I mean, you have both done so much for the fire service. Lexipol is a great resource, and the other one is an incredible resource, obviously, the Secret List Firefighter Close Calls. And as we get close to wrapping it up here, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about these resources that are out there, because they may not know about them. But part of being a good professional firefighter is staying on top of things and keeping your department current and know what's going on in the fire service. And these websites of yours are just fantastic resources. Why don't you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, Gordon and I first met at a sleepover at Michael Jackson's house years ago. And I'm just kidding.
Wasn't there a policy against that?
Yeah, exactly. That's how we came up with the idea we need policies. So we used to teach for a group called Command School. Command School was run by
Which
Chief
I went to in
Billy
Cleveland, Ohio, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
I went to that one year.
Yeah. So we used to travel
stuff
around the country and do this training, and it was a really good program. It was Gordon, myself, and a number of other fire folks. And Gordon and I became friends, and I had already started the Secret List well before that. In 1996, I think it was 6, I got my first computer, and I discovered that you can search for more than just one thing on the computer. And so I started searching for fires and rescues and things like that, and I started sharing that. And my original group was 10 or 12 people, and over time they say, can you add me to your list, add me to your list, add me to your list. And so I did, and then I started putting this is when I was using AOL, I put all the recipients' names in parentheses, which made it appear as a blind carbon copy, BCC. So people would ask me, who's on your list? And I'd say, it's a secret. And I don't know, I was just screwing with them. I didn't give any thought to it. And eventually then I started, I'd say, a firefighter struck by a car, and then I called it the Secret List. And that's kind of where the Secret List came from. We don't divulge how many are on the Secret List, but I can tell you it's massive. It's 6 digits, and we're very, very proud of it. We're also very protective of it because you'll never see an ad. You'll never see commercials. You'll never see spam. We only send out what we consider important, and basically what I consider important. And it goes all over the world. We have like 30 countries plus the United States and Canada. And basically we share any time a firefighter is critically injured or killed, or something politically that may be of value, such as they're not renewing the Fire Act grants, or they're not supporting a cancer bill, things like that. So the Secret List started in 98. Next year it'll be its 20th anniversary. And again, we guard and we've been offered the mailing list. If we would sell the mailing list, I could retire really well. I had no idea what that kind of stuff is valued at, but never going to happen. I have a number of wonderful folks that help us with it now. Originally it was just myself. Writing the Secret List, and then Brian Kazmierzak came on board. Brian's a pretty well-known FDIC instructor. He's our operations director for Firefighter Close Calls, and we've got about 5 or 6 subject matter experts who cover different areas, whether it's personal survival, such as mental health, or it's the weekly fire drill, or whether it's wildland. We've got it on there, and we started building up Firefighter Close Calls from the Secret List. So back to where that came from. So Gordon was a recipient of the Secret List. And again, anybody who wants to subscribe, by the way, just go to firefighters-paid.com and look for subscribe to the Secret List, and we'll get you on there. So Gordon said to me, why don't you have a website? Because this was before Firefighter Close Calls. It used to just be the Secret List. And I said, well, at the time I really didn't have any money, and I definitely didn't have any time. He says, well, when you find time, let me know, and I'll fund the project. So about a year later, I reached out, and we'd become friends, and we spoke regularly, and I said, I think it's time. So he pays the bills. Every page you look at firefighterclosecalls.com is paid for by Gordon Graham. That's why there's no ads, because he pays for it. And the idea of him paying for it is that you can get right to the news. You're not filled with ads and commercials and all that kind of stuff. It's strictly that stuff. And the reason we also like it is because we can say what we want. If we're going to write an editorial, we're going to comment about something, we only report to ourselves. If Acme Fire Equipment has a bad fire truck and we want to write about it, but Acme Fire Equipment is advertising on our website, it puts us in a tough situation. We don't have anything like that, unlike Congress, where most of them, you know, how that goes. They take money and then they have trouble making the right decision. But we don't have that situation. So anyway, the secret list will be 20 years old in 2018, and there'll probably be a big parade down Main Street, and there'll probably be a presidential declaration. And yeah, and
everyone gets a day off.
yeah, it's a national holiday and all that stuff. So. But it's fun. It really takes a lot of time, but it's a lot of fun, and the thanks we get from people is amazing. And I'll give you an example. There are thousands of T-shirts to firefighters in Louisiana, Texas, and now Florida, and soon to be Puerto Rico, because when there's a real bad storm, we'll send one secret list out asking firefighters to send new shirts, and the response is insane. So we understand the value and the power, and we sure appreciate everybody that participates in that.
That's great. That's awesome. I read about how successful the T-shirt campaign was, and it doesn't surprise me. You know, it really doesn't. And the secret list, firefighterclosecalls.com, just an incredible resource. You know, we talked about training earlier. Again, any training officers out there, just go on to Firefighter Close Calls. There's no shortage of drill topics and information you can take back to your firehouse and use, and how would this apply here, what would we do, and make for some interesting drills where you're valuing your people's time. You're putting a good drill together that's beneficial, informational, keeps them engaged. Again, in firefighterclosecalls.com, that'll link you to the secret list. And you know, you talked a few minutes ago about Lexipol. There's something coming up with Lexipol in the next week or so. Isn't something about police officers arriving at a fire? And thought I saw something about that.
So every couple of months, Lexipol sponsors a webinar, and this upcoming one, which I believe is it's on Wednesday, October 18th, 2 weeks from tomorrow, right? Yeah, and we've got some police officers and some folks from ISFSI who wrote a program to train police officers on what to do when they get to a fire before we get there. So it's really, really cool program. And I just shot out again today on the secret list and also on my Twitter and on my Instagram that we also still have available to download and listen to the active shooter webinar, of which we had the fire chief of West Webster, the fire chief of Prince George's County, Maryland, and a battalion chief from Dallas, all of whom responded to line-of-duty death active shooter incidents. So in light of the lunacy that went on in Las Vegas this week, it's a good chance to refresh your members and make it into a drill.
And how can people access that? That's on there as well?
Yeah, just go to lexipol.com and click for webinars or click for fire. You'll see it on there. Or just shoot me an email through Firefighter Close Calls, and I'll send them the link. But, really good stuff. Lexipol, what they're doing with their webinars is very unique. Their webinars are always featuring the people that were involved in a particular incident. So it's really like, you get a chance to actually talk or listen and call in to the people who are involved in these incidents. Big deal.
And glean some much important information and lessons learned from people that have been there.
Pass it on.
Ooh, pass it on, right? Absolutely. Well, Chief, we've been going for damn near over an hour and a half now, and I think I could talk for another hour and a half, but I don't want to do that to you, and I know people's attention span after an hour or so starts to wane a little bit. So a couple things before you go, though. I just wanted to ask you if you could just sum up your final thoughts on the volunteer fire service and what we can do collectively and even individually to create and maintain, if you're lucky enough to have it, a professional image and a professional operation in our hometown volunteer firehouses. What do you have to say that's most important, or the couple most important things we can do? Yeah,
so if you're in, be all in. You join for a reason. You join the volunteer fire department because you volunteered your time, but understand sometimes the organization will dictate how your time is spent. The leadership side, we covered that pretty well tonight. You have an obligation to understand that the time that these people are giving is precious. Don't screw it up. On the other hand, if the sofa isn't quite as comfortable as you like, if the big screen TV isn't big enough, you know what, get past that. You joined to serve. Serve each other, have a ball, and if not, leave. And I don't mean to be mean, but if this isn't for you, if you just can't attend the drills, you don't like the services your department provides, but yet it's been decided that's what your mission is. If you can't go along with it, move on. But don't just stay in there and be disgruntled and be upset. Hit your reset button, and hopefully the idea is not for you to walk away, but to reset your button and get re-engaged. And you know what? You're lucky you have an opportunity to serve. There's a lot of people who don't have that opportunity. But again, it's a balance. It's like a marriage. Both sides got to work on it. So you may be fully engaged, but yet you go to your firehouse and you get in trouble for doing one thing, and somebody else who did that same thing gets in no trouble. That's a problem. That's why a lot of people don't want to be around. I've said for years, Tom, the biggest problem in the volunteer fire service is the volunteer fire service, meaning how we treat our people. Sometimes we can eat our own alive, and we need to get past that if we truly want to have active members, welcoming members. If somebody doesn't look exactly like you and they're coming to join, maybe they got a funny sounding last name, maybe they're from another country. Gang, it's 2017. Open up those doors and let these people participate. We talk about diversity these days, and that's including in the volunteer fire service. You need to open your doors and make these people welcome. Good, solid background checks, obviously, for everybody, but a good, fair training program. You'd be surprised how it can crank up that energy and enthusiasm in your fire company.
Absolutely. And I like to say all the time, make it a firehouse, a true firehouse. Firehouse, warm, friendly, inviting, just like your own house is. And diversity is John Murphy, who's a retired chief in the Seattle area, just wrote a great article. It was on one of the websites just the other day. I posted it on my professional page about embracing diversity in the fire service. And I'll reiterate what you said, Chief. It's 2017. We need to open our doors and embrace diversity, welcome members in a nice, welcoming way. We can still teach them how to be firefighters. We can still hold them to the expectations we have of firefighters. But it begins by accepting them and bringing them in the door. And who couldn't use more members through the door today? So, Chief, we covered a lot of really good stuff today. I'm getting hits on the chat here. People are just loving the conversation, and I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about. And it seems like a lot of guests that I have on the show, I end by saying, would you like to do this again someday? And we can cover even another hour and a half of topics, because I don't think there's a shortage of things we could talk about.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So
no. I'd love to come back on. It'd be a pleasure.
Never doing it again, right? You took up too much of my time.
Absolutely a pleasure. No, I love I love this. I'm told I'm very passionate about it. I certainly feel that, and I don't want it to end. So they say, when are you? You talk about retiring and stuff. If I can't pass my physical, or if I start drooling, those might be indicators that it's time to slow down. But then I'll just take lots of pictures. But enjoy the opportunities you have. Stay engaged, and anytime and thank you, Tom, for the service you're providing, because your strong focus on the volunteer fire service is admirable. And I know a lot of folks listen to the show and they enjoy what you talk about and what your guests talk about. So kudos to you for doing a great job, and absolutely it'd be a thrill to come back on anytime you want me.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much. Now, if members or if people listening want to get a hold of you, Chief, what's the best way that someone could reach out if they have questions or want to bring you in for a seminar or want to pick your brain about something? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, just reach out to firefighterclosecalls.com. And on the, I think it's on the left side, there's like a contact us or contact Billy G or something like that. But there's a way to, and Brian gets those and he'll forward them to me. But, and just one quick final note, congratulations to my son, who's a career firefighter, was a volunteer for 4 years. He's now a career firefighter in Prince George's County, Maryland. He just got promoted to lieutenant on Friday. So
fantastic.
Pretty proud of that as well.
Oh, how proud are you? How proud are you?
Yeah, pretty proud.
Following
I'm
in
living
the
my
footsteps.
life. I'm living my life through him.
Congratulations.
So yeah, I'm very proud. He's a good kid. Yeah, good stuff.
That's great to hear, Chief. And again, I can't thank you enough for humbling me with your time tonight and agreeing to be on the show. And I really look forward to seeing you down the road at the different seminars and conventions and chatting with you some more. And we'll get you back on the show again because I still got about half a page of notes we didn't get to yet. But that's okay. There's always another show.
That'll be great, yeah. Well, look, we'll
right.
see you soon, and we'll definitely see you at FDIC in April.
Absolutely, Chief. Thanks for being on. You take care and be safe.
Care. Thanks, everybody.
All right, brother. Just a great show tonight. Chief Billy Goldfeder. Can't thank him enough. The legendary, the colorful, but also inspirational, and really cuts to the chase, doesn't he, about what it takes to help achieve success in our volunteer fire service. And I hope there was something for everyone to glean a little bit from, to take back to your firehouse, to take back to yourself individually that can make you a better professional firefighter. And I just want to thank you for listening in tonight. And again, feel free to reach out to me, tamerrill63@AOL.com. Contact me on Twitter. Please check out my Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page. Give it a like. I have a presentation where I take information from these great firefighters, from these great role models, putting it into a presentation on what we can do collectively to help achieve a more professional operation in our hometown fire department. So please, if I can be of service, reach out to me. Again, thanks to our sponsor, Honeywell DuPont FDIC Scholarship Program. Again, you can nominate someone you think is deserving for a great opportunity to attend FDIC 2018. And you can just go right on to the Honeywell DuPont FDIC Scholarship Program, and all the information is there. And it's on the Fire Engineering website as well. And we thank them for helping sponsor these shows. Thanks for listening in tonight, people. I really appreciate it. Our next show will be Tuesday, November 28th. That'll be show number 20. And I promise you I will continue to do my best to serve you, to bring on guests that are both inspirational and informational and can help us all do our job. So please remember at all times that being professional has nothing at all to do with earning a paycheck. It has everything to do with delivering competent and compassionate service and taking care of not just our customers, but our own members as well. And it's all of our responsibility to develop, maintain, and uphold a professional reputation. It's all of our responsibility. It's all of our duties, paid or volunteer. Thanks for listening in tonight, folks. Be safe out there. Be kind to one another. God bless.